So yeah, I mean, in terms of what we're going to be speaking about is obviously in relation to do with, you know, things spoken about recently. I had a discussion obviously with Kieran previously, and you know, he shares the same frustration over many things, um, especially with regards to, you know, the whole stuff that the conservatives, or I say so-called conservatives because they're not true conservatives, but you see this populist movement, and it's the same thing with the socialists, etc. Just Marxists in general. A lot of people really don't understand the first thing to do with economics. And I remember yourself, Kieran, of what you were speaking about. Um, I don't know about obviously folks. I don't know if they've commented yet or that. If you guys are on, post a comment just so I know that it's working or that, just to ensure. But nonetheless, hopefully you guys can hear what's been spoken about. You can hear Kieran, you can hear myself, can't yous? I'm pretty sure yous can.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, and I can obviously hear yourself as well. So it's just to check to see it at their end. You know what? Yep, that's good. Good. So you can hear, can't you? From both of us. I would imagine they can. So yeah, I mean, just as an introduction, you know, with yourself, Kieran, how did you get into the whole thing? You know, how did you reach the position that you did? You know, because I know you're an anarchist and in favour of capitalism and that. How did you reach that position?
Uh, I mean, my ride was actually pretty easier compared to like other people. Like, I mean, beforehand, like I was like really super hard left in the sense of I was brought up by like a you know like Black American Democratic family, and but the issues with that is just simply that when you don't have independence in your family, in which like my family was, they are hardworking people,
Mm.
but just on the political standpoint of not being responsible for your well-being, that's what made me question the state a lot more. But it was like very conventional because I kept asking too many questions of other people's political beliefs, and then that's what got me like really angry of like understanding the philosophy of politics, because it's like if you're a conservative and I'm a liberal, then we don't agree on like what we agree on, but yet we're still gonna have to vote on a given date. It
Mm.
just doesn't make any sense because it's just like there's just so much how should I say political banter between labels that makes people think that they're one up above you,
Yeah.
and it's like that's what threw me off out of like statism progressively. And I guess like one day when I got into the word libertarianism, I was like, hey, this is pretty interesting. I started looking at it. I started watching actual libertarian thinkers like Murray Rothbard, Ludwig von Mises, everybody that you could think of, and I watched like YouTubers that talked about those people and had their own libertarian type content, and then that's when I naturally just got into anarcho-capitalism, because it wasn't just for, I guess, like the trend itself. It was mainly for like, look, if you really are interested into this idea of anarchy, well, number one, you're already in it, and number two, you have to acknowledge that if you ever want that position to be final, to be part of your belief system, you have to give up the idea that it's okay to enforce your beliefs onto other people, regardless of what they think. Until those people enforce their beliefs to other people, then that's when you have to like defend that position of non-aggression to value other people's individuality and human autonomy. And that's when I took it very serious because I just naturally started talking with like a friend that opposed it, and then me and him just went back and forth. And I mean, like, we're still friends. It's not like he disagreed with me and then he just walked off, like, away from me. But,
Yep.
that's what made me, like, naturally, like, attracted to libertarianism because I think libertarianism is, like, the only philosophy in the world that actually does respect people's disagreements, and everybody can still be together on it, regardless of what we believe in.
Mhm.
But those that are inconsistent and make let the ideas of it unpopular, that's what I truly oppose, and I'm not gonna let that happen because this is like one of the greatest philosophies that I've been introduced to, and why should people that call themselves that label that aren't consistent with it, be championed when the people that are putting in all the hard work should be, listened to. And, that's what makes me, the person that I am today, because I want to keep educating myself and keep being better for who I am.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, you touched upon a good few points there, especially with how you obviously got to that position and you began questioning things. And I've noticed that with several people of recent. It's very, very easy for people to fall for things like socialism and that, especially here in this country. And it's like I was just recently speaking about there, because of the issue that I was out celebrating last night with my pals, because we went out about 5 o'clock or that, because Rangers had lifted the league title. And obviously it was the first time in about what, more than 6 months since I had obviously last seen them, because of all the lockdowns and stuff like that, which is, it's just been an absolute nightmare, so to speak. And you know the whole thing, obviously I was out celebrating there, and when it came to just before it, there was these, it wasn't in level 3, put it that way, right? Nicola Sturgeon imposed level 3 just the night before. Obviously the Rangers fans are going to go out and celebrate, done on purpose, you know. That's more or less what you've got. And see, today, the ones going out and protesting in favour of, Palestine, right? Nothing will get said about that. And I walked in, because obviously I was going to go, back down just to see what there was. And the police had obviously, thymied George Square off and everything. They had sent out a warning to, myself. They're saying, "Oh, you're being watched. You're being watched, and if you don't get away from here now, you're going to get arrested." I'm thinking to myself, I mean, what the fuck what am I doing? I'm not doing anything. I'm. And it's all because a minority ruined it for a vast majority. Thousands had showed up, and just because a minority had ruined it for others because of their fighting and stuff like that, the police came in and started, all their nonsense. And just when I was trying to go home, like to go to Central Station and that, they shut that off. Then I tried to go down, one of the main streets to head in the direction of the East End, because then my only option was to get picked up. And before you know it, I seen a lot of the supporters running in my direction, and then the police charging at them, the riot police. And all I did was ask one simple question to get past, just to, walk down, and because that's the direction I'd need to head in, just to, to go home. And a simple question, and they threatened me and says, oh, they're going to set the police dogs on us. I mean, this is the thing, because see now, it's not a case of the police serve the people. It's what we're living under is this police state, and this is unfortunately what we've got here. But everything with the lockdowns and all the rest of it, it just makes me cringe. And like you say, I mean, the only moral, in my view, moral position, like you say, with the voluntarism and stuff like that, I've got a lot of respect for yourself in that regard, because you understand that. A lot of folk don't. And this is the thing, because this is why this country's in, the mess that it's in. It's why, despite the fact that even after having passed the hate crime bill, they still managed to go out and vote for SNP. Like, a lot of them still managed to go out and vote for SNP despite knowing that. And I probably brought this up before, but there was one of the boys on Facebook or that, your typical nationalist, and because I don't consider libertarians nationalists, but a typical Scottish nationalist, the typical collectivist views. I brought up about the whole thing today with the Named Persons Act, and he says to us, "Oh, what's wrong with that?" I take it out of context. What's wrong with that? I mean, this is what you're basically dealing with and stuff like that, because these folk haven't got a clue. They don't know the first thing, whether it comes to, economics. You ask these folk, what's that? Because I recently had a comment that was on one of my videos, more recently. I'm pretty sure it was the Lauren Southern video or whatever. And this person is saying, oh well, individualism is actually the cause of many of our problems today. And I'm thinking to myself, you've been watching too much Richard Spencer. That's me being brutally honest. They don't even have a clue what individualism is. It's impossible for individualism to be the cause of any of their problems. In fact, if anything, collectivism in practice is basically the state controlling and directing the economy. And who was it that caused the immigration crisis problem in Germany? Angela Merkel. That was the fault of collectivism, yet for some strange reason they seem to think that's individualism. I mean, this is what you're up against. And the sad part is about it, and the reason why I thought, well, this would be an interesting topic to speak about with yourself, because you understand it yourself, and we recently had this conversation. The thing on Lauren Southern, Lauren Southern, I think she means well and everything, but she's lost it. She just doesn't have a clue. It's why she moved away from libertarianism to begin with. But you find a lot of these so-called, and I say so-called, conservatives, but then they're saying to you at the same time that capitalism's a problem, and that the free market doesn't work or something like that. They obviously don't even have a clue what conservatism really is. And even although I'm not a conservative, and I'm a libertarian, and much like yourself and that, they don't understand these things. You know what I mean? And I know you had past comment on the whole issue today with the likes of Lauren Southern and all the rest of it. I mean, what's your perception of a lot of these folk?
I would say Lauren Southern is like the definition of what you would call the SJWs on full mental disorder, because I just don't think like these type of people that represent with the new generation, which I don't really believe in political generational labels. Like people say I'm a millennial because I'm 26 and I was born in 1995. I don't care about that. I just care that I live in a good world where I can live my life, and I just want to be left alone. But it just seems like for people like her, she can't get away from that, and she has like a very weird just I need to be in your business type of woman, like where she has to be triggered over anything that you say and
Hmm.
anything that you possibly disagree with her. She does pretty much what the same thing that people argue against of what leftists do in terms of like Marxist philosophy of being, I don't know, just very obnoxious, not listening to other people's arguments, always calling for violence when people disagree with them.
Hmm.
So I just don't see how she's any different, because she says that she wants all these issues gone. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, like, what are you going to do about it? And then you start seeing her be affiliated with like all these weird radicalist right wing groups in a sense. Like, I don't even want to say right wing. I just want to just say that she's just associated with like inconsistently driven people, I would say. And I just don't like those type of people, because it's like she's
Hmm.
not doing anything right on her behalf. And if she's going to be consistent of championing liberty, but while having like the state's oppression behind you, no, that's not going to work. You're going to lose a lot of interest from your followers, and eventually you're just going to call for divide. And that's why, me personally, I've just never liked her, because she hasn't done anything. Yeah, she says that she was going to run for mayor out in Canada. Okay, fine. But then but then what? She starts getting very authoritarian, because she doesn't keep herself consistent with
This is
like the
exactly
direction.
it. And this falls in line with the populist perception and
Yeah.
the populist movement, and I've been seeing a lot of that even on YouTube and that. And the populist perception is so and the problem is with the populist view. You ask any of them, none of them have got a clue what individualism means. None of them, right? I mean, the only reason why, and it was I can't even remember who he debated or something. I don't know if he debated Sargon at any time, or I don't know if he debated whoever it was. It was Richard Spencer. See if I get a hold of Richard Spencer, I would have torn him apart. I would have absolutely ripped him apart. Because, and this is a sad thing, because most folk don't seem to understand what individualism is, and collectivism and all the rest of that. And as you were saying there about the whole thing with Lauren Southern, she seems fickle to the point where she'll just, you know, jump the bandwagon and take a certain authoritarian, protective position simply because it's popular and that's going to get her more views and whatever, and there's inconsistency. And inconsistency could be seen, and it's not just Lauren Southern, it comes for so many folk. Um, it's the inconsistency where they're sitting there banging off about corporatism, right? And complaining about these monopolies and oligopolies and whatever, right? They're complaining about these things. Mind you, they don't even understand what a monopoly is, because Google is not a monopoly. A monopoly, by its name and by definition, as Walter Block had rightly pointed out, mono meaning singular, right? No competition whatsoever. And that does not live up to the definition of the likes of Google when they've got the likes of DuckDuckGo, etc., and other search engines. But that isn't to say there isn't a problem today, and I do acknowledge the fact that there's a problem with things like big tech and stuff like that. But they've got this perception that's so contradictory, where they sit and they complain about capitalism, but then they're defending the very protectionist position that created this problem in the first place. This is what led to corporatism. They don't get that. They think it's somehow the freedom of the market that resulted in this problem, and it's no. They don't understand that it was through that of calling for mere government intervention that created these problems, that escalated, that created the issues with. Let's just use for argument's sake, and I've pointed this out so many times before. You look at the main American healthcare market and the AMA monopoly. Well, who is it that granted that? The government. And then, of course, you've got the third-party payer system in the main American healthcare market. Who engineered the third-party payer system? The government. And what was the third-party payer system responsible for? Well, a collusion between the private pharmaceutical companies that were getting away with shafting the consumer. So this is what I mean. A cartelisation that was enabled to form and last and hold its position simply because of what government created. These people don't understand that. They seem to think it's government's regulation that's going to protect them from these things. That's what they actually believe. They think the government's regulation is what's going to break them up. And so they call for more government action and all those type of things. And they don't. And this is a sad thing, right? Because I watched more recently and stuff like that on, I think it was a build up to the presidency thing. Of course, Trump didn't, win all that. But, I was watching, these videos, why I left the left. And a good number of them were swaying towards this so-called conservatism. And you probably know all the popular ones like the Hodge twins and all the rest of it. I'm a big fan of them. I enjoy watching their content. They're quite funny in that. And it's likewise. There's a few other things. I don't know if it's the Diamond Sisters or something, whatever it is. But a lot of them are so starry-eyed around this nationalist perspective, and their perception of the conservative movement. Well, I don't know the ins and outs of their particular views, I don't know, but I would imagine that a lot of them really don't understand what true conservatism is, and it was never anything at all to do with this current system that you've got today, and they keep calling it capitalism, and it's no. And it's the same, and this is the sad part, it's the same with PragerU, and I've seen this numerous times. Why are the likes of Turning Point USA or Turning Point UK or PragerU using rhetoric to say, oh well, the free market today, and no disrespect to these folk, they're not living under a free market, they're not living under capitalism. They don't seem to understand that. Most of them really don't. You ask most folk what capitalism is, and see if they're even dare to come out and say to you that it's, your version of capital. There is no version of capitalism. That is capitalism. It's the separation of the economy from government. So what you find today is like I say, it's a lot of these folk around you, and within the populist sort of movement, they themselves are not exactly helping matters any. I don't know what your particular view is on them, and in particular. I'm not entirely sure, but they've got such a wrong perception of everything, and so long they don't realise it, right? A lot of these people who claim to support capitalism but are trying to call today's system capitalism and stuff like that, and they're saying to protect themselves to the free market, they don't realise that they're actually giving these socialists some sort of credibility to, and we know they've not got any credibility, but they're giving them a platform to more or less, take digs and say, here's why we need to get rid of this system today. I mean, they're not doing themselves any favours. It's the reason why we're in this mess today, why we've got things, why we face things like the Great Depression, banking crisis, etc. It was all to do with their thingies. So what's your view on that?
Like which one you want me to, respond to?
Well, mostly in regards to your perception of, much like the Lawrence Southern types, a lot of what you personally experience with folk who, they think is somehow capitalism and all the rest of this, and they call today's system capitalism and that.
I think honestly they're just all like mentally misinformed, like just on like the principles of understanding what a free market is, because a free market would just straight up be anarcho-capitalism at its fullest if we're gonna just go all the way in. But in terms of like a white market economy, um, that wouldn't even be close to one. But in generalistic senses, that's a good reference to use in terms of like benefiting the argument that when you free up an economy and allow people to trade and be free in their own detriment, that is what a free market at a beginner's level would look like. And then at the more advanced level, that's when people have more decentralized, independence away from the state and less coercion being applied to them, with more mutual voluntaristic exchanges through consensual means.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I can see obviously with yourself. I mean, you fully understand. You can see, and a lot of them, a lot of people just don't seem to understand that. And even if they do acknowledge what a free market is, they seem to think it's, like I says, they seem to think it's, somehow the problem, and it really isn't. And this is a big part of the issue we've got today. And I've noticed several folk, like I says earlier on, and you'll understand this yourself. It's so easy for folk to, fall into the trap of, believing in all this socialist nonsense. They end up buying into it all because they're, it's either folk who buy into the crap about the free stuff, the free this, the free that, the free this, that, and the next thing. And it's because they're looking at things for the perception that, look at the education costs, look at the, healthcare costs, and they end up buying into all that sort of stuff. And then you get these, what you call so-called radicals, or whatever you want to call them. But they end up taking advantage of those sort of people. And they start spouting all this nonsense, just like a recent argument or a recent comment I had, and it was the claim over the market socialism, which is an oxymoron. They don't even understand what the market is, which is, and a lot of folk don't even understand socialism, and this is the issue. Um, with the libertarian, the idea that you can somehow have a libertarian socialism or a democratic socialism or a market socialism, and yourself, mate, it really is an oxymoron, and it's because of the fact that they don't understand the very meaning of socialism with the communal ownership. So this is obviously a question yourself and that. I mean, you yourself understand the very meaning of socialism. So your perception, how you define socialism, how would you define it?
I would define it as the state ownership of the means of production through violent coercion against the people of the state proletariat class. But that's how I would see it theoretically. The state is monopolizing an entire area, and they're the ones in control of the people that have no economic liberties to control their wealth, property, income, anything that would result in uh, body ownership of human autonomy.
Hmm.
So therefore, you don't have the ability to use your computer whenever you want, or drive your car whenever you want, or shoot guns outside your house whenever you want.
Mhm.
You're going to be enslaved by the state by every means necessary, and you really have no true freedom or liberty other than just to listen, like a slave, and you don't have any conscience to do what you want to do. And I don't see how socialism is such a good sell on that, because that's like telling somebody that you're a murderer, but you don't really mean to murder. You only mean to murder whenever murder is right. And that's a very subjective thing to say to somebody, because they're going to say, look, man, you're pretty crazy. I'm not going to mess with you. But to that, to a person that is psychologically broken, they're going to use any mind control talking points to try to make it seem like it's more peaceful, and people aren't really like that. And at the end of the day, we're just here to help people out and make people, happy with one universal goal, which is to be all equal, which, that doesn't make sense either, because if you want everybody to be equal, how about you let everyone become unequal to let them do whatever they want to do? Like,
Mhm.
I'm not just saying like somebody goes out, drive their car, 1,000 miles per hour and start hurting people. No, I'm saying like let people decide on what they want to do and let the rules be determined by a consumer, reputation to hold people accountable at all times when they do something wrong to another person. Not give political immunity to a group of people, i.e., the state, and let the state hover over your life, and then you have no means to do whatever you want to do to hold anybody accountable for it. No, that doesn't make any sense. And socialism alone and statism alone is a very barbaric philosophy, and the people that have
Absolutely.
shown time and time again of who they are, they're just killers. They're basically just evil, barbaric people that pretend to be heavily angelistic saints to provide a proper promise for everyone to be happy. But at the end of the day, everyone's going to die. Just look at what happened when the very first, state formed. Ancient Sumeria in the region of Mesopotamia, the very first thing that they did, enslaved their own people, killed millions upon millions of people, and then started senseless wars, and then they ended up getting conquered by, I think, the Byzantine Empire or something like that. But prior to the Romans, like, they were absolutely destructive. They weren't helping people, they were killing people. So that's how socialism is. Socialism is just a barbaric philosophy that's based off of, violent, incoherent, you know, unfactual information.
And this is
And
the
it
thing.
doesn't,
And like you
yeah,
say, I mean, the collectivism that dominated the world for millennia's dominated the world, even long before the Industrial Revolution and all the rest of it. And you go back to those examples and stuff like that. Even the Roman Empire itself, all of it was based on coercion, and you've never seen a single example of what they claim. Even the stories about the so-called anarchist Catalonia or the Paris Commune, or the examples that they try to use of the Ukraine Free Territory, they never were. They don't actually tell you the true story behind the authoritarianism that you would immediately see in these sort of places and that. And it's just like in that the Chaz, it was like I said before, it was immediately forming its own form of central government within the space of 2 weeks. Although it's very infantile, but you get where I'm coming from. And no, I completely agree with you. I mean, that from the perspective, they could deny that, of course, but that is basically socialism in practice. That is, really what defines it. The political centralisation, the economic central planning, the collective ownership and control of the means of production and all the rest of it. They always, they're always very pedantic over that of socialism, and this is why they bring up that stuff today with these silly ideas of market socialism. And I mean, I just recently had that comment. It was, it wasn't even in a video that was anything at all to do with the thing. It was a recent video, obviously, on this stuff to do with the photography or something. And I think he mentioned something about market socialism, and it's so cringeworthy because, like I says, I mean, and you just mentioned there yourself, the collective ownership. Well, what's a market? A market is something based on trade, right? So, and this is the one thing that they don't understand. Socialism is not about a particular individual having something that another individual doesn't have, and then both come to an agreement with an exchange. That's capitalism. That's what capitalism is. That's why if you don't have capitalism, you don't have trade, so you don't have money coming in and out of the country. That's why you see, if you were to look at India, for example, it shut off trade to the outside world. It was the same story with that of what China did. Socialist regimes will do that. They'll shut off the trade to the outside world, right? And this is the whole thing. They don't understand what a market is. When you're referring to a market, you're speaking about individual buyers and sellers. And this is why the Soviet Union, okay, it wasn't truly what communism should have been, but they don't understand the words it should have, right? They don't understand that the Soviet Union had no choice in practice but to accept the market to some degree or another, right? So in other words, as you've seen for videos, you would have seen the individuals going into the stores and buying the goods that they want, right? That to a varying extent is capitalism in that regard. What isn't capitalism is where you have a government that nationalises everything, owns the means of production, gets to centrally plan the means of production, dictates how much gets produced, what gets produced, where the resources are allocated, dictates the control over prices and everything. And that's why it was one of the biggest socialist regimes that the world had ever seen. And they can't understand that for the life of them, because they just can't get their head around the very fact that there's a colossal difference between the theory that they believe in to that of how the likes of the Soviet Union tried to put these things into practice. And you're spot on with regards to like you mentioned with the evil of it and whatnot, and in practice it'll always, go down that road. But like I say, socialism's communal ownership, and the market's got nothing at all to do with that. This is what a lot of folk can't get their head around that. We get the age-old argument, and this is what, for the life of them, they just can't get their head around it. They don't understand the age-old argument has always been the market versus central planning. That's always been the argument. Capitalism versus socialism. They've never understood that. An example of that would, and I've said before, when you're speaking about the market determining prices, well, that's capitalism. It's down to the laws of supply and demand. When you're speaking about central planning, you're speaking about, a central authority who just happens to be the government, dictating and controlling what prices are going to be. An example of central planning would be the minimum wage control. You know what I mean? So this is, and it's obviously down to a question of scale and stuff like that, because you don't have, like full blown central planning or whatever in today's economy. But even, Marxists aside, a lot of folk who, support the mixed economy and think it's about striking the right balance between capitalism and socialism, a lot of them don't understand that. They just, it's like so many folk just can't get their head around these things. And I suppose a lot of folk haven't, really looked into it. They haven't really had the time, perhaps, to study it. Maybe some folk could argue with that. But like I say, I mean, certain folk easily end up falling at that trap of, falling for things like socialism and whatever. And, I've been noticing these folk have and this is the issue, and I had this discussion last night. They seem to eventually reach a point where they begin to question things, and it's just like yourself. Although you weren't in the position of supporting socialism to begin with, but you were the type of person who began, really questioning everything. You know what I mean? Which led you on the road to the libertarianism and stuff like that. Well, it's just like a lot of these people in that, initially they end up thinking, oh well, socialism's ideal, and then eventually they start questioning to themselves, this doesn't seem right. There's something that just doesn't seem right. They start to question, and then as soon as they question a socialist, say for example, a socialist that leads someone up the garden path, and as soon as that person begins to question that socialist over specific things, the socialist becomes very aggressive. And I've seen things like that before. You take, because I was watching the videos, of course, of the why I left the left, and a number of them were describing exactly that. They were saying, oh well, I eventually, started to question certain things, and just because I asked a few questions, they started calling me all these names, they started abusing me and all the rest of it. That all in one, that's classic leftism. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think naturally I just don't like the left compared to, like, right wingers, because the left has just proven to be more sinister and more evil on a magnitude of promoting more violence. But I just don't like any philosophy that requires violence at all, because if you're trying to help people, you should be forcing, not forcing, you should be promoting more nonviolent ideas to make people like you. I just don't see how you can just still be a status and think that, your philosophy is working after countless amounts of times through political organizations that have been risen out of it, that have given more negatives rather than positives. I don't ever know one time that has ever benefited me from the state other than, okay, like I have disabilities, I'm able to at least like maybe get some assistance, but maybe to a certain degree of maybe getting food stamps here and there. But it's like, why can't I just have all that money to myself? Like, I can easily support myself. I don't need food stamps. I don't need the police telling me what to do. Like, I'd rather pay for the things that I want, and I should be the one responsible in case I get into a bad situation. Not like John and Tom need to be punished because Rob and Ron want free stuff, blah, blah, blah. So therefore, they need to get knocked over the head in order for their issues to be compensated for things that they didn't work hard for. And I just think, like, the people that think like that now are the ones that will end up, regretting that in the future. Because it's like, an eye for an eye does not meet, a one for one trade.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I can acknowledge certain folk who, in my perception, you know, certain folk have got good intentions and they do genuinely want to help other folk, and I can more than understand that, but they've been led up the garden path with a load of nonsense, tell myths about capitalism. For example, tell a load of nonsense that if you get rid of the welfare state, that somehow means that you only want things affordable for the rich and all that. You get what I'm saying. It's usually all the crap that people come out with, and unfortunately people end up buying into that nonsense. And it's why, you get a number of folk who end up, taking that position where they think that, that seems to be the answer. But you're right, the coercion's most certainly isn't. And it's one of the reasons why people go down that road. They think it's a means of how you help and whatever. I must add, it's not just a case of somebody being able to earn 100% of their own earnings. It's a case that you then have the economic independence to freely decide and choose what you do with your own money. For example, you can freely choose who you want to give to charitably and whatever, to help folk. And that's a big difference to using the means of force. So I can certainly understand where you come from in that regard, especially in retrospect with helping folk in that. I do agree with that perception. Plus the fact we've got history there. We know that the welfare state doesn't work. It's been damaging to the economy. Whether you just look at Britain, look at the United States of America. Things like that, the social security. It's been, these things have been very, very damaging. You can see that for the debt level and that, But I mean, you're absolutely right with regards to all those things. And that does correlate with, the evil side of socialism. It just basically is evil. So it's just an ideology that's pretty much predicated around that. I think the only slight disagreement I have is perhaps you do have a lot of good intentioned, a lot of good, well-meaning people, but they just don't understand that what they're supporting is actually evil. And it's just one of these things. So I mean this is the thing, because it's not just a case, like I says, it's not just a case of the Marxists. You've got a lot of folk out there who believe in this idea that you need to strike the right balance between capitalism and socialism, and that this falls in line with the issues that you're faced with with regards to the economy. I mean, what's your own perception is stuff or learning that, because I know for where you are in the US and that, and of course you noticed more recently with the shortage problems that came about with the gas shortages, as you would call it. We just call it petrol, but I mean, what do you make of all of that?
Oh man, and honestly, it's just horrible, man. I feel like either Venezuela or just USSR is like gonna come right in and it's gonna be a bloodbath. Like, I don't want to see it here in Albany, but it would be kind of funny to see that in like California or something. Like, I'm not actually wanting to see that, but it's just like, it's just like so surreal of how the state thinks that they could just shut an economy off and then try to rush it back in, knowing that they screwed up the first time, and
Yeah,
then let everybody suffer, and then they just say, "Oh, well, screw you, because we'll just give you some of our money, but you're gonna pay it back in full with our new taxes and blah blah blah." And it's like, it's absolutely bullshit, man. I should never be living like this. I should be living free. I should be having all the things that I have in place. Like, why does somebody that's suffering right now should be going through that? All the people that are complaining about, oh, there's not enough jobs, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, thank the state for that, because the state, like, did all of that. Ever since this whole COVID BS started, you start seeing, like, the unemployment rate increase substantially higher and higher. And, remind you, I started working with labor, like, I would say from the start of, oh man, I forgot. I think July of 2020 to at least November. Yeah, because like that's when I left to go to a different agency.
mm,
But the unemployment rate was still increasing. Like, all the money that the state kept, dumping bill after bill through legislation, it just didn't help. And all the clients that still was on, like, was on unemployment stuff, like, still kept, you know receiving unemployment benefits, even though that they were eligible to go back to work. And I mean, knowing that I wasn't at labor for that long, but just hearing like all the people that were like working on the phone lines and doing all those types of claim, documentation with certain clients, in which I'm not going to go so deep into that, but just the amount of people that are not willing to work, that's a huge alarm, because you're going to create a massive gap in the worker labor force.
mm-hmm.
And if more people are going to continue to do that, then I think you already know what's going to happen. It's going to drive the U.S. economy downhill when one state goes completely broke, where nobody's not able to, get their bills paid on time. They're not able to hold on to their property anymore longer, and then people are start gonna, they're gonna start, running back to the state thinking that everything's gonna be okay. But then at the end of the day, they're just gonna line you up and just treat you like a slave. And that's just step one to full blown socialism. Like, just one little thing that you surrender to the state, they're gonna take all that and just basically use you like a puppet. And
This is the
I'm
thing.
not gonna do that. I'm going to invest my money. I'm going to get away from all that, and I'm not going to surrender my property to the state, because everything that I have now, I worked hard for that. I've been on my own for 4 years, going into 5 years, and this is horrible for like
Yep.
the younger generation, because I told my grandfather like the other day, like, if the U.S. goes into a civil war, it's definitely the people's fault for starting it, because everybody that wants to be lazy and try to think that everybody should just not work and be productive and just be a slave to the government, with all this COVID, restrictions. It's like, that's not how that works. That's not how human action works. Like, there's a reason why people have to, resume back to their lives at some point, because if you don't let those people be who they are and let them, interject with other people, then that's when you see all these unnecessary riots and mass forms of violence arise because there's no incentive of people to be productive in a working class, and then that's when you start to see like radicalist groups have all this free time in the world to do all this crazy nonsense. I don't know if you heard, but out in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, right? They just started getting back into rioting, and not one news outlet ever talked about it. Like if that continues to be like a massive trend where people start getting into that more, like you saw like months prior to like the George Floyd thing, then just be prepared when you start seeing a whole massive like
Yeah.
rebellion of just criminal syndicates just taking over cities after cities. You know that's just something that I'm worried about, and I don't want to see that because
Yeah.
at that point, that's when the U.S. military will step in, and that's going to be a bloodbath.
And
Like,
this is another thing in correlation to that because, and it's an interesting point that you raised there because just like the military stepping in, you know, it seems that governments like to use moments of crisis as a means to use as an excuse to gradually take more of your freedom away and make you more and more dependent upon the state. And you get that impression. You would definitely have seen that with regards to the lockdowns and whatever. And when the government uses all those subsidies to bail out and whatever, it's basically it's the government sending out such a message to say, oh well, here we are, we are here to provide for you. It really is. It's socialism, um, and your own fear there. As a prime example, not just from an economic perspective, you take for example the problems, but your own fear. You only had to see what happened in Seattle, you know, in places like that, where that Capitol Hill autonomous zone being thing took. It's just violence. It took over New York as well because of the type of folk that's leading it. I'm perhaps optimistic in a sense though that when these things happen, it turns more and more folk against these things. And I think the approval rating of the likes of Biden and is his name Harris or something? I can't even remember.
yeah, Kamala Harris.
That's it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, she's a nutcase, man. But and this is the thing because the approval rating, in my perception, has plummeted and would have seriously plummeted just more recently, because I think a lot of folk would have got their eyes open, and that would have been a big slap right across their face because they were the ones boasting, going, "Yeah, we've got Biden and Harris, and see now, gas prices are going up." And
Jobs are being lost.
they had the audacity to question.
That racist wall is being built back up, according to liberals. So, isn't Biden racist?
Exactly.
On top of Kamala's, yeah, she's very racist towards black people.
Exactly.
She don't give a fuck.
No, you're absolutely spot on. I'm just going to, thing me some of these questions or comments and stuff, because Alex Trusk had asked, "Hey Scott, have you heard of Leo Gura? He did a video debunking libertarianism," and that's something I'm obviously going to get round to. Uh, I can't say I've heard of Leo Gura. I don't know about yourself, Have you ever heard of who Leo Gura is?
I don't think I've heard of him.
So, I know there's so many. It's just aye. They claim they debunk libertarianism, but they're not capable of doing so. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, your own points of what you rightly raised and everything. You know, just checking through these other comments. So, so that's the thing that somebody mentioned about civil war and that. That's something you would never wish, but you never know, man. You know, it's just with how crazy things are. The U.S.
Yeah,
military are
just
nothing more than. Well, that's the thing. I mean, he mentioned about how the U.S. military are dogs of the state. Yeah, I mean that's the very reason why I support private security and that. You know, that is one of the main reasons, and it's just like I was explaining earlier on about my perception of the polis. I mean, in my eyes, they basically serve, because this is a joke, by the way. And as you know, the recent war that's going on with again it's broke out with Gaza and the whole thing to do with Israel and
yep.
the Palestinian sort of protests that are taking place the day. And this is the thing, George Square was, crowded with the Rangers supporters, but the police were out there for the sake of that, right? Now, how come the police would show up for something like that, but they didn't show up for the sake of the protest the day of the Palestinian sort of protest things? You've got to ask yourself, and in my view, that's been done to my perception, that's been done to the state orders, in my opinion. I don't specifically know, but it just doesn't smell right, the whole thing, doesn't it? And I don't, this is the thing, I don't trust, because you know yourself with cultural Marxism, it seems to me that there's favouritism. Like I've watched it where these, specific groups are, protected and favoured, but when it comes to like people who, take for example, it could be nationalists, British nationalists, whoever it may be, they're picked out, singled out, and they are the main target. And this is and the police even down south have been very soft when it came to many of these rioters from the left. And you'll remember all the Black Lives Matter protests last year and stuff like that.
Yep.
And even the toppling over of statues and whatever. They literally just stood there and watched all that crap, right? But see if that was like nationalist or something, like, and it's not to say I support nationalism, but see when it comes to the groups that were out there, protesting to protect the statues, they were led in different directions, and I really don't trust any of them. I don't trust, and it's because of the fact that when you put the police in the hands of the state, it's guaranteed funding, whereas in the free market, you have to work for it, and if you don't do your job properly, you're not gonna get you're not gonna get your wage. They wouldn't hire you. You know what I mean? But because of the fact that there's a guaranteed funding to the state-run police, because of the taxation, then I believe that it's just incompetence and it'll always just serve the state because it's let's face it, it's the state that's financing them. You know, that's why I don't trust them in that regard. And I'm no someone that's saying get rid of the police. I'm saying, there needs to be a proper change.
Yeah, I would rather see the cops in the hands of a free market, and it wouldn't even just be like, oh, like you have to pay like an hourly rate to your private security officer showing up to your door. Like, no, I want to have like full control of when my security shows up and how my property is defended in case criminals do show up to my house. Because why can't there be that market innovation where the security knows who you are, they know where you're located, they at least have like visual of like where you live, so that way, in case you are in danger, they know like where to come into your house to like make sure that you're not going to get taken down by the criminals that are invading you. I
Yeah,
just kind of think like
it's
that
true.
would make better sense instead of like having the cops just rush into your house. They don't know who you are. They have never spoken to you, face to face, and they don't even know if the criminals are actually like, the criminals breaking into your house. They could just think that, okay, yeah, they heard some gunshots. They don't know if it's you. They don't know if it's like the criminal. So they're just gonna walk up in there like Rambo to think like, oh, okay, well everybody's like a enemy to us because, we're just not that well informed about this client that called us, and we're just going to just take everything for granted to think that you're either probably dead or alive.
Yep.
So if we accidentally shoot you, then sucks on you,
Yeah.
because it doesn't give you any like protection whatsoever, because they could turn against you too. Because who's to say that the police may know that criminal and they could be like, oh wait, that's my homeboy that I know from up the streets. Nah, man, you're all good. Go kill this guy. Like, stuff like that happens. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
I'm not stupid to think like that.
Exactly.
I'm not stupid to think like police officers are like the Hail Mary, God Almighty protection of my life. No, like, I truly hate cops. For those of you that are listening, I truly hate police officers coming from the state. I have a lot more respect for a private security officer that knows what they're doing, because they have
Mhm.
to listen to the individuals that are paying them, because they
Yep.
have a job to actually follow. Versus a state police officer, he can get away with pedophilia, and guess what? There's no legal, accountability for that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
It's
can I
like
can
you've never
see it's.
heard of any. Yeah, I was just going to finish off to say that you've never heard of any cops being held accountable through their own police departments, because nine times out of 10 the state usually protects them.
Hmm.
And I know like one part of what the U.S. I forgot where. I think it's out in New Mexico. I think they just passed like a legislation stating that cops no longer have, state legalized immunity. But, I still don't believe in that to be true, because it's like you guys are the ones controlling the police. So it doesn't matter what the government makes up in their rule book. You guys have the power to still protect them, even if they do messed up shit. So why can't the people be in control of their own security, in terms of making sure that the security is there for their protection and making sure that the people are satisfied with that security?
Yeah.
Like, I don't I don't see any issue with that, because one, if there is a security force that is corrupt, you want to know what's going to happen?
Hmm.
Poof, they're gone. They're absolutely gone. They're shunned from, society.
Hmm.
People will no longer buy that security service, and they would most likely want that security service like everybody prosecuted. And I think like under what I believe in, that would definitely happen 10 times more on a higher basis, because consumers want to make sure what they're paying for is 100%, legitimate, and it's giving them the highest satisfaction for what they're paying for. And I'm not just saying that you pay a crap load of money for security protection. I'm pretty sure, in a purely high substantial market competition of private security, people will have the ability to choose what type of payments that they want to do with that security force. And I just would say let the market handle it. I would like to pay whatever subscription that I want for my security. And if that security force does wrong to me, I should be the one in control to either fire them away from me and I could choose another service, or have the ability to defend myself like every other human on Earth, to be responsible for my own property to defend. Because I think that's really what everyone's concerned about. They're concerned about their livelihood and their property that they're trying to keep away from other people. And look, like I know people are bad worldwide, but it's not like to a high magnitude where everybody is going to be helpless in case people do have bad intentions to harm others. And I'm not saying that's never to be a guarantee. I'm saying that you should be the one responsible to apprehend those people with your own tools and technology that you acquire through your own property, and
Yeah,
not let somebody take advantage of you.
I mean, I completely agree with you in that regard. I mean, this is the thing, because the fact that it goes back to that whole thing again, where because they're pretty much guaranteed, they're subsidised by the state, guaranteed through the taxation, and there's that incompetence. And I remember Rothbard's argument, and he said about the resource allocation and stuff like that. It's another story to it. But yeah, I mean, I completely agree on that point in that perspective. And that's the issue with the whole thing with the current state of things. And as far as I'm concerned, they're really only going to serve, those who are paying them. So it's going to be the state in that regard. Whereas the private security, like you say, it's accountability. It's easier to remove corruption in that regard than it is when you've got something centralised. And like you say, I mean, in terms of, if they do something wrong, protected, pretty much by the state. I know that there is a problem today within that, and people just, it's like I say, I mean, people just seem so protective of these things. It's just like, take for example the NHS. It's the same story. I mean, it's almost like a religious institution. It's pretty much like that with people's perception on those type of things. In terms of security and police being in the hands of the state. This is a big problem in this country, unfortunately. And you only had to see the examples of these riots, and it was a prime example. I mean, I never felt that they were serving the people. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, would you rather let somebody take advantage of you and you don't have a say in it, or would you rather be responsible of taking ownership of your problems
Yeah.
and being responsible of what may come out of it? Because I'd rather be the one responsible of apprehending people that want to infringe on my liberties and life included, because I'm not no pussy. Like, I'm going to fight to the death if somebody tries breaking into my apartment right now. Like, I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter what the state tells me. I will kill somebody if somebody breaks into my house. But the people that are not going to be there for me will be the cops, because
Correct.
they will always say, "Oh, we're going to be there for you." No, you're not. You guys are going to let me die, and you're not going to be there on time. So I rather take advantage of what I have now, because
Well,
I
that's the
don't.
reason why you have the right to bear arms and protect yourself in that respect. This is the very importance behind that, and I do firmly believe in that, in that respect. No question about that.
Well, I would say it's in everybody's human nature to defend their life, regardless. Nobody doesn't want to be infringed upon by some criminal or anybody that wishes to do, evil intent to others. It's like I just truly believe that I will not hesitate to hurt somebody that wishes to hurt me because I don't know who you are. You just walked into my house thinking that you run everything and you could just hurt me out of your own ill will. So I'm going to have to hurt you because you never respected the rules of my property the minute you walked in. So if the state can do that and just walk through everybody's livelihood and think that nobody's not going to respond and mass violence against them, that's foolishness 101. Like the ATF only has like what 5,000 to 8,000 people employed to them. Like the US population as a whole would eliminate them in like, just a few minutes. Like if you had every single homeowner that has guns right now, they would literally just walk up to the ATF headquarters and just wipe them out. Like if you're just looking at it from a third person perspective of who has more power, it's, the people. The people are the last line of defense. That's how I see it in the eyes of justice. If people want justice, they're going to line up in the eyes of defense for, justice. I think that's how everybody should do in a voluntaristic manner, consensually, and people should unite on principles that are like-minded to respect other people's well-being and nature to live free and let people be responsible for their own lives. And if one does do wrong things, then those people that live in that community should have that person held responsible for it. Not no state that lets them get away with it and then there's no accountability on any angle. Because even to what minarchists believe in, they would still, in certain cases, try to think that it's still okay. And I'm like, then like, like what's like the whole difference between big government and small government?
Mm-hmm.
Just a little bit of evil versus a whole lot of evil? It doesn't make any sense. I rather get rid of all the evil. I want cancer gone by, tomorrow if there was a cure. Why can't cancer just be gone like right now? There's no need to just keep a little bit of cancer. I want all the cancer gone.
Yeah, I can
you
pretty
know?
much understand where you're coming from in that regard. I do. That's what I do have a lot of respect for. People who support, the anarchist position in that regard. Um, and this is the sad part because it's bad enough trying to get society to acknowledge and understand the free market, um, and that's difficult enough as it is. You've got some folk out there who seem to, for whatever reason being, think that they can just brush aside, isms, and they can just, as if to say that they can just, completely ignore individualism and somehow just they'll be perfectly fine. You know what I mean? As if the world works that way. Um, and unfortunately, there's a lot of folk that just don't understand it, and this is the problem because a lot of folk don't understand. As difficult as it is, just trying to get them to understand the value of the free market and why it gives them liberty. They seem to think that they can have liberty without it. And when you're faced with that issue and most folk in society seem almost against it, then it's difficult enough as it is to even convince them about, completely ridding the government. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I would more than, love if it was ever given the go ahead, if it was ever, tested, I would fully, back it. And I agree with your arguments and what you say. I completely agree with you on the things. At the end of the day, it's getting rid of all this, basically, in my view, was immoral. Um, and I do understand the anarchist argument, especially the argument against the state in terms of having a monopoly on force. I can understand their argument from that perspective, which I do find quite interesting. It's a reasonable point. It's just, regardless of, military, like, of course, it's been mentioned, in above comments. Um, so yeah, I mean, in terms of overall, things like these things with the security, I can't think of anything that to say that there's some sort of benefit at all to that of socialism, but it's a struggle as of itself. Just try to pull away from the current mess that we're in the day, and I try to keep everybody, regardless of what their views are, whether they support anarchism, whether they're minarchists or whatever. I try to keep people on the same page that the most important thing for us is to fight, to liberate the market, to push towards a free market, and if there's an opportunity to go further, then great. Why should that never be tried and whatever. But when you look at the current state of things, you only had to see we're not even over the 2008 financial crisis. You look at the state of the debt level and stuff like that. This is exactly what I mean. I mean, this is the very reason why, from an economic perspective, it's the very reason why we need to free the economy, because people don't realise that this current economy is unsustainable. And someone was trying to argue the point that you can just use quantitative easing, and I don't think he realises that it was the quantitative easing, the QE1, the QE2, the QE3 that all failed. It was all partly responsible for what led to the 2008 financial crisis. There's all the fractional reserve banking, controlling, manipulating interest rates and everything, like I explained before on that. I mean, it's pretty dire, and that's the main argument that I make, behind the free market. I know that people, excuse me, sorry, I've not got the Rona, but but the whole thing today with their perception is troublesome, because they think it's just a case that you need more bailouts and all the rest of this nonsense. They're perpetuating the problem. So, I mean, what would you say to folk who are really starting to question things, are starting to, and they might be, partial or were partial to socialism? What would you say to those folk that, because I'm talking about the type of folk who might be starting to question things and starting to, considering their position and pushing away from the left? What would you say to those people?
I'd say good for them, but probably go a bit further, because I think just stopping there just doesn't really go anywhere. And like, I understand, like, they want to just go to a better side of the street type of philosophy, but I don't think that just brings you anywhere, because it's just going to reset you back to square one, and you're not going to get anything accomplished. And I think the more they question and the more they get more knowledgeable of what the real issue at hand is in front of them, then they'll start to see, the real meaning of, corruption, of statist philosophy. And I think maybe that will wake them up, but I think it's more based on them rather than just saying, oh, well, they should just look into libertarianism and everything will be solved. No, like, it's definitely something that you have to teach yourself rather than just trying to teach other people. It's like, I can't teach, you know, uh, let's just say quantum physics. You have to learn that by yourself. Like, no, like nobody can't